All right, we're going to start the database portion of the class today, and just a couple things as we get started. First of all, I'm going to be going over this thing right here. Don't worry, I'm going to remove this stuff that's on here in just a second. But that's the hard copy that you have. That's the big thing. I started to staple them, and I thought, you know what, I don't want to staple them because you may want to turn from page to page. There's 22 pages in it. All right, I'm sure they're not happy that I use 200 pieces of copy paper today, but I did anyway. All right. Plus, in addition to that, you've got a page on top that's got a bunch of URLs. Okay. Now, if you look up on the screen here, that one of the first URLs that's in there is this one, and it's called the 50 Best Websites to Learn MySQL. All right. You've got that there, and many of the URLs that are shown in here are on that site. Not all of them. I wasn't going to put all 50. That would have been kind of stupid. But just so you know that. So that's the first thing. Second thing, if you look up on the screen, I'm not going to turn that off, but we looked at this before. We talked about a character, which was any keyboard character, about a field, which was one or more related characters, a record, which was one or more related fields, and a file, which is one or more related records. Well, in this context, a file and a database are virtually the same thing. All right, so we're going to start talking about databases right now, and it is a one or more related, and actually I guess I skipped one here, because when we're talking about a database, we should put in here table, and a table is really one or more related records. All right, and a database is one or more related tables. You're going to see all that today. We're going to go over, I don't know how much, but we're basically going to go over everything that's in this handout. I tried to give you something that if you want to, you can read it. It's also online. There's the URL. You've got the URL on the list of URLs that I gave you. All right. But, if you want to follow along electronically or whatever. All right, so that's the first thing as we get started here. Let me erase that because otherwise it's very hard to read what's on the overhead here. Now, this handout that you have in front of you, again, the same one that I have right here. Notice it is a MySQL tutorial. So the stuff that's in here is specific to MySQL. The reason I'm telling you that is we're going to be concentrating for the next two, this week, next week, and we'll see if we get into the next week on MySQL. From there, we're going to go on to SQL Server, which is very similar to MySQL. Literally, it's almost the same thing. So why are we doing this first? Because this is free, all right? And this is used a lot out in industry. This, MySQL, will work with C#. It will work with C#. But since C# is a Microsoft product, Microsoft has created MS SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server, which is their version of MySQL. All right. Unlike MySQL, which you can get for free, SQL Server, you do get it for free, sort of, but we're going to end up having to do another download in a little bit of time. I'm not going to go over any of that stuff right now, but just so you know that. Now, Microsoft, in their infinite wisdom, when they started going through and they started working with databases, they decided that they were going to create their own database. And the idea was they'd create this database and everybody in the world would be using it. And in some ways, they weren't exactly correct, but they created a database which you may or may not have heard of that's called Northwind. Now, are we going to do anything this big? Of course not. All right. But the idea is everything that you see in here that's in one of these boxes is a table. And all of these tables are connected to each other directly or indirectly. And you'll notice when you look on here, you can see that over here you've got, it looks kind of like an 8 that's sideways, and over here it looks like a key. All right, if you can see that. What they're showing you is that's the parent, that's the child. So for every one of these, there are 0, 1, or more of these. All right? This is all stuff you're going to hear, but I just wanted to mention it to you. All right? The last thing is regarding this, and I put this in here. I didn't give you a copy of this, but this was what was in your book, all right, for figure 14.5. And I didn't put the table in here, but this is kind of what we're going to be doing. All right? And the reason that I brought up, just so you know, just a second ago, the reason that I brought up talking about north wind is in the example here, they ask you to build a database and they call it south wind. All right? And if you were, well, what the heck is south wind? It's their tribute, so to speak, to north wind. All right? Now, several weeks ago, I asked all of you to come in here. We did that. We should have all done this unless somebody was absent that day. And you should have come in and you should have loaded a product called XAMP. Remember that? Is there anyone here who was not here that day? All right, then what you're going to have to do right now, and we'll wait, it literally takes about 2 minutes to download it, is you're going to have to go to a thing that's called ApacheFriends.org. All right, and if you see I can't read that, I'll make it a little bigger. So you just have to go to ApacheFriends.org, right there. If you go to ApacheFriends.org, it's going to push you off to this page that's right here. Now this is a little confusing because it says XAMPP Apache plus MariaDB plus PHP plus Perl. If you download everything, which is I think what I asked you to do, we didn't go and just ferret out certain things. But if you download everything, just so you know, MariaDB right here, and I don't know why they did this, that's the free version of MySQL. All right? You can buy a version of MySQL, and what you get when you buy the version is you get free help. All right? Oracle, years ago, Oracle, which you may or may not have heard of, it's another database company. They bought MySQL. MySQL was first created by one or two gentlemen, and I think it was just created as an open source database. They sold it for millions of dollars to Oracle. And Oracle decided if you want help with your database, so if you're a company that might need help, we're not going to give it to you for free. But if you're somebody working in education, or let's say Amin's got his own little mom and pop shop that he creates, all right, he probably won't need help, then he can get the free version. That's now called MariaDB. All right, just so you know that. All right, so for those of you who have not downloaded it, what you want to do is you want to download the XAMPP for Windows. It's right there. All right, you'll click there, and it'll put the executable down here. I'm not going to re-download it because I've already downloaded it. Again, I'm assuming that you're using Chrome, you know, a real browser. But if you want to use something else, you can use something else. If you want to use Explorer, you know, somebody should take you back outside and beat you. But other than that, all right, Firefox is not a bad browser. But I just am to the point where I use for virtually everything. All right, when it's at all possible, I use Chrome. So if you've done that, it'll download it down here, and that's the longest part of it is having this thing go and copy to your download folder. All right, but when it does, you can right mouse click on it right now, even if it hasn't downloaded yet, and choose Open when done. All right, and like I said, it should take about a minute or so to do this. If you did previously download XAMPP, for those, if I can have your attention, for those of you who did download XAMPP, then when you click your Windows Start button, and you'll both do this in just a second, but when you click your Windows Start button down at the bottom, and if you go down to the very bottom, you should find XAMPP down there. All right, and underneath that, it'll look like this in just a minute. I say it almost looks like a dog bone, but you'll want to choose the XAMPP control panel. Now, you two won't be able to do it yet, but you will be able to do it in 3 or 4 minutes. All right, so if you choose the XAMPP control panel, it's going to come up and look like this. Once it looks like that, you want to click, and you want these two to both be on. Yours probably looks right now like this. One sec. So you just want to click Start by Apache and Start by MySQL. That's what you have to do to get going. Yes? Yeah, it depends. That's going to depend on how you've got your system set up. You know, you might be asked if you want to be able to add a product or whatever, and just if you say yes, you should be okay. All right. All right. When this does eventually come up, it should hopefully at least look like this. It says, do you want to do this? Of course, you'll say yes. All right. Then it'll come up, and basically it's going to say that it wants to start XAMPP. Don't worry about that Bitnami thing. Okay. So is this what you're talking about? Okay. If you get this, all right, what they're saying is you could potentially have some problems with the download. I got it too. I just disregarded it. I clicked OK. All right. Now from here, again, they've partnered with Bitnami for whatever reason. You want to click next. You might as well just choose everything that's here. It's fine. Now, the only thing we really do need is Apache and MySQL. So if you don't want the rest, but you do, I'm sorry, you want Apache, you want MySQL, and you want PHP But if you don't want the rest, you really and truly wouldn't need them. The reason I bring that up is, for example, Amin has told me that his machine's a little bit older. And maybe if it's a little bit older, maybe he doesn't have the RAM, maybe he doesn't even have the hard disk space. Or maybe he just has filled it up, or maybe one of the rest of you have. So you really don't need FileZilla, Mercury, Mail Server, Tomcat, PHP, Perl, Webalizer, and Fake SendMail. You don't need those. But it doesn't hurt. They're not that big. So go ahead and click Next. This is an important thing right here. Make sure don't change that. Don't put it under program files. All right. It works much better. I've done it both ways. It works much better when you keep it right here. Now I'm not going to click next, but if you do, it should tell you that it's ready to start the installation process. And then tell it to do the install. All right. And if you haven't done that already, literally it should take no more than a minute or two. Yes. Yeah, if that, no, you don't, see mine isn't empty. So what they're telling me is I've already got it installed there. All right. So I could put it in here, like if, for example, if I just wanted to put it under the C drive. All right. Next. Yeah, I don't know, that's not empty either. I have to create a blank, so I have to come in here. Let's take a look. No. And under the C drive, I have to create a new folder, and we'll call it garbage. So I can get rid of it in just a minute. Yeah, I have a few things open here, Jeff. I don't want to do. I didn't want to do that. Oh well. When I'm in, and when I'm in, there we go. So if I say thank you, garbage, and then I click next, you get this stuff. You don't have to worry about it. Like I said, they've just partnered with them. You click next again, and it says it's ready to start doing the install. And hopefully it is going to start doing the install. All right. I don't know why, but they make you look at all this stuff. You can do things since they partnered with Bitnami that you couldn't do previously. They're making it look like other packages. All right. It's a little bit more powerful than it used to be, for lack of better words. Did it start doing the install? All right. So it's now ready to begin the install. If I say next, boom, it's going to do the install. Now I'm going to get rid of that garbage folder, but just so you see what's going on. All right. And like with me, since I've got a boatload of stuff open right now, mine might take longer even than yours does. This is the final list they gave me of the people who will be at the job fair tomorrow. So if I counted right, there's actually going to be 66 companies there. They're actually going to start, I don't know if they're going to be open per se, but they're actually going to start at 8:15. That's when the companies are going to begin to arrive. It's right next door to the other building. Well, I don't know if we'd call it all day, but if nothing else, if you want to go there right away instead of coming here, that's not a problem. I'm going to head over there about 8:45. Now, I can't force you to go. And I know there's some of you in here that probably are good, that I'm not going. You should go anyway. You should go even if you're not going to give anybody a resume. You should walk around and see the type of people that are there. These are people who, in a year from now, you could potentially be sending resumes to try to get a job. All right? And I don't want to be a hard ass, pardon my French. They do force you over there. They were all forced to go to St. Louis to the job fair. All right, they made them go. There were 2 people that didn't go, and one person already has a job and had to go to their job. All right, and the other person, I'm not going to explain it, but they had a personal situation. Go ahead. There are several that have just IT there or have IT, amongst the things that they have. But what we were told was, for example, let's say this, it won't be AutoZone, but we'll just grab Bridgestone here. They might say AMT, but yet they might have a programming position open. All right, and I'm not saying if there's 6, you shouldn't come over there with 65 or whatever resumes and give one to everybody, because there's a lot of people who don't have IT positions. But the other thing you can do is just introduce yourself and say, are you ever looking for interns? All right, it's a great place to start. All right, like I said, I plan on being there, getting there, walking over there around 8:45. How long am I going to stay? It depends on what's going on. Yes. Yeah, I understand that. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, you can look at it that, let's say that they actually, most of them are there by 8:30. Sometimes the prize, the victor, is the person who's there early, because that's how they remember you. They're going to remember you, and they'll also remember the people who walk in there if it's done at 11, at 2 minutes to 11. All right? But the majority of the people will come probably between 9 and 10 o'clock, to be honest with you. Yes. If you want a list of that. In fact, I'll tell you what I'll do is, rather than print this list off, which it's only I guess it's only 2 pages. How many people would like to see the list? I'll tell you what, I'll print a few. I'll print 5. That should be plenty. All right. Yeah, I want to abort that process. Okay. So, was everybody then able to click start? Click start, go down to the bottom, click XAMPP, and choose XAMPP control panel. Were you all able to do that? If you have not done that yet, please do it. What you might want to do is, when you get down to here, you might want to right mouse click on here, or you might even want to drag that out, or however you do shortcuts. All right? For instance, I've got a shortcut right here for the XAMPP control panel. I'm not going to tell you this, but as far as I'm concerned, I want you to be set up for this every day. All right? At least for the next couple weeks. So I'm not going to say, hey, let's all get into XAMPP's control panel. No, just do it. All right? And again, once you've done it, yours probably looks more like this. You want to click Start for Apache and Start for MySQL. Probably would work fine if you only did MySQL, but we're going to do them both. If you get anything like this, don't worry about it unless you get an error message. Occasionally, what happens is, I believe that this tries to run on port 80, and if you've got something else on port 80, all right, you may have a problem. If that's the case, you're going to have to let me know. All right? Okay, then you can take this and just minimize it. Don't close it. Minimize it. All right? So you're back up to here. Now that said, what we're going to do then, in fact, I guess, well, one more thing before we will minimize it, but we want to do one thing first. I've already done it, so let me close that. So if yours looks like this, what we're going to end up doing is you're going to end up learning how to build databases with this in two ways. For the first week or so, we're going to do it from the DOS command line. So I want you to click where it says shell. And if you get this screen, that's good. If you decide you'd like to make it full screen or whatever, you can do that. It won't hurt anything. All right? But if it looks like this, you're not there yet. Okay? But this is the first command you're going to have to remember. And it's the word MySQL space -u root. Can you all see that okay? MySQL space -u root. That says I want to begin MySQL and I'm going in as root user. That's the login, that's the account that got created for you when you created XAMPP, your root. And we can change that. I can show you how to create other accounts. That's not what we want to go through right now. I don't care about that. All right? If you hit enter now, and if it looks like this, you're in. If you got an error message, then raise your hand and let me know. And I'm going to assume that if no one raises their hand, that you got in. Yes. Are you getting an error message in your window? Okay. No, yeah, and I actually, did you say yes on that? Okay. All right. Then what you're going to have to do is go ahead and minimize that. I think we can fix it, but now I'm doing this off the top of my head. So, all right. Bring up File Explorer, however you get the files. You have to get to your C drive. And there should be an XAMPP folder under there. Click on manage, so it's not that folder. Is there a folder named XAMPP? All right, double click on that. All right. Try to double click on that again. Anybody else have any problem? Is there anyone else who is not able to get in? I take it did all this before, correct? Yes. Well, there's another way to do it, but he's got to get a little further than he got before. And that is, what he can do is, when it starts to go through this, if it does build the network or the folder hierarchy for him, he can go into a file called a folder. Check there, but there's a file in there called php.ini. And if you go in there, you've got to manually go in and change wherever it says 48, you've got to change it to like 88. And then run it and enter the one file. Because then it's grabbed a different folder. Did it go this far before? Okay, so again, I'm expecting that everyone else other than Brady here is right here, correct? All right. So let's look at a couple commands. The first command we want to look at, and mine is going to look different than yours. The output of my command will be different than yours because I've been working with this already. We want to see what databases we have on the system. It's already built a few databases for you. So you type in, and this is all case insensitive. I recommend you type in everything in lowercase. Everything we do will be case insensitive unless we're putting in information into records, which we won't do today. But just type in show space databases, semicolon. Some commands that you use here will require a semicolon on the end, some will not. But even the ones that don't require a semicolon on the end will take it just fine if you do. So every time we put in a command like this from the console, get used to putting in a semicolon at the end. If the system expects there to be a semicolon at the end and you hit enter and you didn't put in a semicolon, your prompt will change from this, MariaDB none or whatever yours says, to just the greater than sign. Then you'll have to put in a semicolon and hit enter, then it'll work. Because what I'm saying is if MySQL expects a semicolon at the end of a command and you don't put it in, it doesn't go on until you put the semicolon in there. Does that make sense? All right, so if you haven't done so, hit enter. Again, I've got more than you have because I've done some work with this already. You probably have, what do you have? Information schema, MySQL, and test. Are those the only ones you have? Those three? You have other ones? All right. All right. The databases that are in there right now, other than test, the database that's called test is literally meant to be a test database. So if you wanted to put garbage in there and play with it, you could. Most people don't. The database that's in there that's called information schema, you shouldn't touch. It's a system database. All right? It keeps track of a bunch of stuff for you. All right? So anything that's in there right now, for lack of better words, you shouldn't touch. All right? If you did want to, let's just say, you know what? I totally disagree with you, Jeff. I've got a database in here that's called music, and I don't want it anymore. Okay? Then you would say drop space database space music, and you'd get rid of it. This is going to be another one of those examples that when you remove stuff, you're not going to be prompted that says, are you sure you want to do that? It's just going to do it. So if you're not sure whether or not you want to do something, don't do it. All right? What's that? You don't. No. You key it back in again. That's how you get it back. It doesn't store it any place for you, any place special. All right. So I'm going to jump into this. Don't worry about having this up there, but I'm going to try to follow some of the steps. So on page 1 of here, of this handout I gave you, they've got a lot of the commands that you are going to end up using if you go through all 44 pages in here. I'm not going to take the time to explain those commands to you now. I'd rather demonstrate them to you. To me, that makes more sense. On page 2, we just did the show databases command. Okay? So now we're actually going to go in, we're going to create our first database. All right? So if you look up on the screen here, how do we create a database? It's not hard. You say create database, and you give it a name. They tell you to call this Southwind. So we're just going to follow what's in the book. Now please look up on the screen here. Please look up on the screen before you do anything. Notice I'm not putting a semicolon in. See that? That's telling me it's awaiting more information. What it's waiting for is a semicolon. So if I type in the semicolon, boom, it worked. All right? If I had just typed in create database Southwind semicolon, I wouldn't have got that second line with the greater than sign in it. Does that all make sense? All right. Now here's a question for you. Do you all know what DOS key is? Okay, that's fine. Do you all know on your, right below your shift on your keyboard, right below the shift key on the right-hand side, you've got shift on the left and a shift on the right. Do you have some arrow keys underneath that? Click the up arrow key if you would. that's underneath it. Click the up arrow key. Look on the screen here. See that? What that does is it shows me all of the commands that I put in. So if I want to go and put in a command again, I can hit, the same exact command, I can hit DOS key. All right. Now, the reason I'm having you do that is I want you to do the show databases again. And now you should notice that we have Southwind in there. All right. That makes sense to everybody? Good, because we're going to remove it right away. Okay? So we're going to drop database, Southwind, semicolon, and hit enter. And then we're going to DOS key to show databases to show that it's gone. Yes. To this window, the MySQL minus U root. Yeah, MySQL space minus U root. What if you have a typo? Okay, let's do that. In fact, here, if you look up on the screen here, I'll go back and create it again. All right, and then I'll tell it to drop it. So try to drop Southwind. Yeah, you'll get some kind of an error message. Sometimes it'll be a very good error message like this one. Sometimes it'll say, basically, you had an error. And if you look it up in the list of MySQL errors, they'll say, this is a general error that you get for a variety of reasons. Okay? I always tell people when I read stuff like that, okay, that's 30 seconds of my life I'll never get back for something that didn't help me a flaming bit. All right? But most of the time when you get an error in here, okay, most of the time, you'll get an explanation. You can literally look up MySQL error 1008 and it'll give you more information. All right? Now I'm going to put something in. Don't type yet because I want to make sure I'm giving you the right command. Okay? So, create database if not exists, Southwind. What do you think that does? It creates it if it's not there, right? Now, if I run the command again, notice I got a warning. Well, if you ever get that, if it ever says errors or warnings, now notice I've got warnings here. I can show warnings. Oops, with a semicolon. And it says, I can't create it because it already exists. So you think, well, wait a minute, it didn't give me any errors. Yeah, but notice what it says here. Whenever it says 0 rows affected, nothing happened. All right? Because I already had the database. But the reason I'm telling you that is if you're worried about overwriting something, you can say if not exists. Okay? So right now, show database says, I've got Southwind, and I'm taking for granted that all of you do also. All right, if you removed it, bring it back again. Say create database, Southwind. All right. Now, I want to mention something to you. You don't have to write this down. You can if you want to. It doesn't matter. Again, you're not being tested on this stuff. All right, but I wanted to show you something, and that is this. When you work with this stuff, there are two different types of commands that you work with. You've already seen one type. The first type of commands are called data definition language, or DDL commands. And there are three of them. I'm going to put them in capital letters just so you see what they are. They are create, not create, alter, and drop. Those are the three types of DDL commands. What these commands do is they work with what's called the database schema, S-C-H-E-M-A. You go, I don't know what that means. You're going to see what it means in just a minute. All right? But right now, we're starting to work with database schema. How do I remember this? Well, it spells cat if you use the first 3 letters. All right, maybe that's stupid, but that's how I remember. Now, once we start putting data into the database, and we're going to do that very shortly, then rather than data definition language commands, we're going to be using data manipulation language, or what are called DML commands. All right? And there are 4 of those. They are select. Oops, that wasn't good. So these are DML commands. They are select, update, insert, and delete. Delete and drop do not mean the same thing. These commands right here, these 4, work with data. These 3 work with database schema. And again, if you say, I don't know the difference, that's what the rest of the next 2 weeks is about. All right? Now, how do I remember this? Well, if I take the S from select, the T from select, the UP from update, the I from insert, and the D from delete, it spells stupid. All right? But there are 4 DML commands. You're gonna do all of these. There are 3 DDL commands. You're going to do all of these. You've already done one of them. You've done the create command. When you use DDL commands, you have to say what you're creating or what you're altering or what you're dropping. You couldn't just say create Southwind. When you say create, the system wants to know create what. So you said create database Southwind. So the system knew what you wanted to create was a database. Does that make sense? All right. Now, right now, we have the database, but if you look in here, is this what your prompt looks like? MariaDB none? Is that what yours looks like? That means there is no database that's currently active. Just because you created it, you didn't make it active. To make it active, you use a command that's not a DML or a DDL command. You use the word use, USE, and then the name of the database. So it's use space Southwind, semicolon. Whoa. Use space Southwind. And notice, see how it says none? I hit enter. See how it changed? That's how you activate a database. You use the word use space the name of the database. Only one database can be active in here at a time. You can use more than one database at a time, but only one can be the active database at a time. So if you're working on something and nothing appears to be working, you look right here, and if it says none, like we had up here, you probably don't have an active database. So to make the database active, you say use Southwind. Now, if you look up on the screen here, please, you don't have to do this, but I just want to show you. If I now type in use music, see how it changed? And now music is the active database. So I want Southwind to be active, so I'm going to do that. All right? Now, right now, there's nothing in this database. It is an empty database. One of the reasons they changed this is your prompt over here used to just be a greater than sign. And people would get confused. They'd be like, well, what database am I currently using? What database is currently active? If if for some reason you really don't believe that Southwind is active, you're going to put in your first command right now. We're going to put in our first DML command, data manipulation language command. I want you to say select database, paren, semicolon. If yours came back like mine did and said Southwind, you did it correctly. If you think I changed to that database, I keyed in the command, and it came back with nothing, then raise your hand. In English, this is saying, show me the active database. And unfortunately, when you run things in here in the console window, the output you get is kind of ugly. Don't let that worry you. Really, it's after you get used to this a little bit, we'll move to PHP-MyAdmin, which is more GUI-like. It's not really GUI, but it's more GUI-like. Yes. It varies. You might have 3, 4, 5, something like that. All right. So, anybody have any problem with that? I do want to show you this if you look up on the screen here. You don't have to do this. But normally in a book or on this handout or whatever, instead of what I just showed you right there where it says select database, any word that's considered to be a keyword, a lot of times they'll put it in uppercase. So you'll see it like that instead of what I showed you. They will work the same way. If I mixed the case and I used an uppercase S and an uppercase D, for example, it would still work. I'm going to put in all of my commands in lowercase, even though in the book they show uppercase. Because otherwise I'm constantly whipping back and forth, and if I forget to put in hit the shift key or whatever, then it's like, what were you doing there? It looks kind of funky. I'll just put it in all in uppercase. Now, many people, when they're learning this, like to put keywords in uppercase because it helps them understand what the keywords are. All right? All right. Now, you can do what I'm about to tell you. You don't have to. But I'm going to put in another command. Would you agree right now our database is empty? Because we haven't put anything in there. All right? Well, remember before I showed you that databases are made up of tables? So I can come in here and say show tables. All right? You can do that too if you want to. You don't have to. Notice the output that you get. Sometimes you're going to put a query in. If you don't know what a query is, we're going to be doing those a little later today. But sometimes you put a query into the database, and you run the query, and you get back this result. Okay? So let's suppose I put all of you into a database, which I have already. So I put all of you into a database, and I put in your salaries. You're going to like what you're making. Okay? So you're not going to probably like it as we go on because some of you are reporting to me, some of you are reporting to Brady, some of you are reporting to Colin, etc. All right, just because the way I set it up. All right, but if I said, let's just, Charles, who's in there, and Charles and Paul make the most money. Charles makes $125,000 and Paul makes $110,000. They make more money than me and everybody else. But the point is, let's say that I said, show me how many people in this database make over $1 billion. And there weren't any, okay? That's what I'd get back. So if you run a query and you get back the empty set, the query wasn't wrong. There was nothing that met that criteria. It's like if I said, okay, how many people here were born in Mars, and at the planet Mars, and none of you raised your hand. It's not an invalid question. It's just that none of you meet the criteria of the question I was asking. All right? So when you get empty set, that's what that means. All right. Now, we're going to put some stuff in, and after we put it in, we're going to take a break. All right? And I would suggest that don't type. Let me put this in. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 8 lines. I'll leave it up there. All right? But I'd rather explain it to you first. Okay, just let me put it in. I can type it fairly quickly. Hopefully I won't screw it up. And I will do it the way they did it in the handout. So I will use here create table because we're going to make our first table. If not exists products. So any name that's not in capitals right here is not a keyword. Products is a name I made. I could have called it Amin, and it would have worked fine. But typically, just like when you create variable names that should reflect what you're trying to do, you should create table names that reflect what they're going to hold. We're going to put products in this table, so it makes sense to call the table products. All right? So I'm going to put that in. You don't have to hit enter here. You could just keep typing and typing and typing, but it'll run off the page. So that's why I'm doing it like this. So I'm going to first say product ID, int unsigned not null, auto, and again, we're going to talk about all this stuff after the break. Thank you. That's my biggest problem when I type this stuff, is mistyping something. And this is the bad thing. After you hit enter, you can't go back again. So if you screw up, just hit a semicolon and you'll get an error message, then use DOS key and go back. With DOS key, you can back up, go backwards and forwards. You can't in here. I can't now go back into this line. I can't. Or into this line. I just can't. The system doesn't let me. So if I screwed up, I would hit semicolon, I'd get the error message, I'd use DOS key, and I'd say okay, and then I DOS key down to give me the second line. See what I'm saying? If you say I don't like that, well, that's tough. Okay, if you say, then you'll like PHPMyAdmin when we get into the more GUI eyes tool, because that you can manipulate any way you want. If you say, well, why don't you show us that now? Because not every installation has PHPMyAdmin available, but every installation has this available. I have talked to people in the biz that, yeah, they're really antiquated here. All they've got is the console, but they have the console. That's why you get taught that first. All right, it's kind of like typically if you're going to learn to drive a stick shift, you learn to drive a car that's not a stick shift first. All right, so I'm going to keep going here. So I've got a product ID. Now I'm going to put in product, not product, code. And again, don't worry about what all this means. We're going to talk about all of it in just a minute. Not null, default. I'm just going to keep going here. Oops. Now, if I didn't do anything wrong, all right, and I did, so I made a mistake in here. So again, I'm just like I showed you, okay? Well, one thing I can see where I've already made a mistake is I should have had a parenthesis right there, and I didn't put one in. So I'm going to come back again, and I'm just going to put the parenthesis right here. Then I'm going to start filling up. I'm just using DOS key now. So the product ID, now DOS key down, product code, name, quantity, price, primary key. Still doesn't like something. All right, so because I wrote primary key. Isn't that nice? Okay. That's why I said when you use this, DOS key is a lifesaver. Oh my goodness. Where's that? Oh, great. There. It's on page 4 of your handout. All right? You can look up on the screen. You can do it from page 4 of the handout. But please look up on the screen before you start typing. Notice now, if you look up on the screen, notice now when I type in, yeah, whatever, show tables, says you have an error in your syntax. Well, I don't know why. Oh, because I've got there. Show tables. There's my table. Products. See that? It's there. Please put that in. Take a break. We're going to start up again at 9:15. All right? I'm going to stop taping right now, though. Let's see. We've already got 50 minutes in here, so I'm going to stop taping.